I'm Leo Walder for Kit Guru. This case is Corsair Carbide Air 740, which bears a striking resemblance to the Air 540 that we saw, what, 3 odd years ago now? It's a large cube style case which is dual chamber, so you basically have pretty stuff and stuff you want to hide away. I'll give you a tour in due course. As ever, head to Kit Guru for photos of the case, and you can see all the details that way as well. So, Carbide Air 740, the thing I've taken off here is this windowed side panel because it reflects light like crazy. Sits on those 2 hinge pins, handle, open, swing open, lift off, nice and easy, gives you good access, shows off the insides. The rest of the panels clip in place, and then the rear metal panel is a thumb screw job. The dual chamber design, it throws up a fundamental problem. The case is designed for high airflow. Corsair sells all-in-one liquid coolers, also sells fans. This case comes with 2 140 fans at the front, 1 140 at the rear. I've removed one of the 140s to give myself some working room, as I'll explain. So it has space depending on whether you go for 120 or 140 fans, 7 or 8 fans. You can fit up to a 280 radiator in the roof and a 360 in the front. Yes, that's correct. So it's got loads of space for cooling, loads of space for loads of fans. But the thing is, it's such a big case, if you don't go for a custom loop, it kind of looks quite empty. Yes, Corsair does illuminated fans, more of that in a moment, and we looked at some of those recently with the ML series of fans. So if you fit a whole bunch of illuminated LED fans, you get a kind of wall of LEDs thing going on, which looks quite pretty, but it leaves a lot of space. So I've gone here for the all-in-one, well actually I've gone for a kind of hybrid all-in-one system. What I've gone for is an Asus Rampage 5 Edition 10 motherboard. It's got a Core i7 5820K processor. Then we've got some EK liquid cooling hardware on that with an Alpha Cool radiator, EK pump res. And then the graphics card, which is the hybrid-y part, is a Sapphire Fury X. So it's got its own liquid cooler, which is mounted in the floor of the case. So I've actually got 2 radiators on the go. Obviously, I could have gone for the custom loop that just extended from the CPU to the GPU and around in the usual style, but this just uses a bit more of the space, and there is plenty of space to use. It still looks relatively empty. So I'll pull the power, and then we'll take a tour around the innards of the case. 2 thumb screws, and off with the side panel, which is just plain steel. It has a magnetic dust filter, but the actual panel has no noise deadening material. And here on the back side we've got a Corsair AX 1500 watt I power supply, so a big beefy fella. That there is like a little sort of stop, which you can slide a number of different positions and lock down with a thumb screw to sort of support the front of the power supply. That's extended to the furthest reach. Here we have 4 2.5-inch drive bays, and there we have, if I can unlatch the thing, there we go, a Corsair Neutron XT SSD. Here we have 3 3.5, 2.5-inch bays, and I've put a Hitachi drive in there. Just for ease, it's a tool-free job. That's not connected, as you can see. It's just to simply show the drive slides in that quite easily. Loads of access to the rear of the motherboard, and then we have various cabling. Now then, going back to that thing about the decisions that one has to take. So as you can see, I've gone for the liquid cooling loop, and I've also put an Alpha Cool drain on there just to make life easy for me, which is why it sort of hangs in this styly. But that is just a matter of choice, and also I've gone about 1 centimetre too long on the hose. Were I to go for the full pretty stuff in the front and untidy stuff in the rear, then logically I'd actually have a pump in the rear, such as, for example, this EK D5 pump there, and then that attaches on that little bracket there, and fluid in and out. The only place I could logically put that would be there, which is exactly where all the cabling comes out of the power supply. Now I could tidy that up more if I went for some aftermarket cables in particular. That would make them more flexible, but I've not exactly made a complete mare of this build, and yet there is realistically very little space there. So if I want to put a pump in the untidy side of things, it's going to have to go there. I'm going to have to work quite hard to do that. The dual chamber design, it has a lot going for it in the sense of wet stuff on this side means I'm keeping away from the power supply, which I particularly, one thing I particularly don't like is having liquid cooling kit above the power supply. It always fills me with fear. A small problem can equal catastrophe. You could see before all the various lights and so on that were glowing away inside here, which were partly from the Rampage 5 motherboard, but also from the Corsair DDR4 LED RAM. That's all nicely illuminated as well, and there are also some lights on the Sapphire graphics card. The fans are not illuminated in this case. It so happens that those two 120 fans I put on the AlphaCool radiator are Corsair ML fans, but they're the non-illuminated type. Which is all a bit curious because that button there, which has a little light symbol, is actually specifically intended to control the new Corsair HD 120 RGB fans. We saw them at Computex, they look very interesting. They launched at the same time as this case. I didn't get any, so I haven't seen them in action. That, therefore, is a specific controller for the fans that I don't have here, which is a shame. There's one other little thing about this front panel. That little blank there is intended for an accessory that Corsair is due to release at some point, which is an HDMI pass-through. So you take it from the rear, get it to the front HDMI port, obviously so you can plug in your Oculus Rift or whatever VR headset just to make life that bit easier. And those two features, the lighting control and the HDMI pass-through, strike me as being the fundamental difference between the Air 540 and the Air 740, because about the only other difference on paper is that this case supports one more fan than the 540, which in the great scheme of things is an irrelevance. But it does bring us to a quirk of this case, which is that the Rampage 5 motherboard has a whole bunch of fan controls, and I believe 5 from a rough count. And I've gone to town plugging in the various fans and such like. The Sapphire liquid cooler is powered by the graphics card, so that's not connected to a fan header. I didn't connect up the fan that I moved from the front to give me some space for my pump res. This would ordinarily live here. I could have mounted it in the floor there, as you can see, but I don't have another header for it. And this is the surprising thing. We have a case here that supports, depending on your sizes, 7 or 8 fans, and yet there is no fan hub. And I would expect to see one somewhere in there. A couple of the other manufacturers, NZXT and Fantex, do their own controllers. Corsair does not appear to do so, and I'm really surprised by that. In terms of the money, it wouldn't be any great cost. The Air 540 is £125, this is £135. A fan hub, I don't know, depending on whether you're talking just a regular hub or whether you're talking something really posh in the way of controlling. £10, maybe £20, possibly. In the great scheme of things, not a fortune. And that, I think, would help a great deal. It's also interesting to sort of just basically pull this case apart. So 2 thumb screws. And again, photos on KitGuru, as I say all the time. Off comes the top panel, which has got this sort of screwed in place dust filtering. So you can clean it out easily enough, but that's like a remove and blow out job. Except you're likely to be using that with the air exhausting upwards. Go to the front and pull, and off comes the front panel. That has a that's a magnetic dust filter there, like so. So that's good, and it shows the inner shape of the case. So there it's flat fronted, there it's profiled. The bottom is a similar thing. 2 thumb screws there, and then you can tip it on its front, pull the bottom off to reveal the bottom of the thing, and what you end up then with is essentially a steel cube with these extra sort of plastic pods on the front for your LEDs and your I/O. And when you strip it down like that, you can see that actually the case itself is it's a fairly solid piece of steelwork. It's not exactly exciting in this form. It really does highlight the fact that it's a steel chassis with a whole bunch of fan mounts, and then you pop on those panels and it suddenly becomes really quite tasty. In this mode it's actually really dull. It is a curiosity of this case that there is no optical drive bay. Clearly it is huge. Here's the front panel. Quite clearly they could have very easily put an optical drive bay in there. and yet have chosen not to. Now, Corsair, we know, has been trying to kill off the optical drive bay for blooming years, and they seem to be doing a fairly good job of it. The thing is, it's kind of an either or. Some people like optical drives, that's fair enough. But if you have the bay, even if you don't want an optical drive in the thing, then it gives you the option of putting in a decent fan controller. As they haven't chosen to supply one, that would seem like a reasonable thing to do. The other thing about that front panel, or indeed this I/O panel here, is no USB Type-C. Which I'm slightly surprised by, seeing as this is the sort of first redesign of the Air since that 540 those years ago up to 740. They're going for the whole HDMI for VR type of thing. In other words, they're leaping into the modern era. USB Type-C, I really don't see why not. It just seems like an oversight. But neither of those things is a damning criticism. Do you follow the name of the thing, and do you go for air cooling throughout, in which case fan, and a huge great amount of space, or do you go for liquid cooling? If you're going down the air route, you've got masses of space. So the graphics card up to 370mm long, CPU cooler 170, which basically is any tower that I can think of on the market. Certainly all the 120s, 140, 150 probably. I'm going to say any air cooler that's going will fit in there without any trouble, but might be wrong. And it cools like a champ, no two ways about it. Airflow is absolutely sublime, but then look at it, it's all perforations, it's all fan mounts, and there is frankly very little given over to noise deadening. It is not an especially quiet case, but as we know, if you have a whole bunch of fans and turn them down, they don't necessarily need to be noisy. It depends how you play it. On the other hand, go for the custom loop and it's perfectly quiet, and why wouldn't it be? On the other hand, for custom loop, it's actually quite a lot of space to work with. The funny thing is there is not a massive amount of space above the motherboard. This Alpha Cool radiator is relatively chunky. It's more chunky than an all-in-one, and yet the space here is tight. There are more chunky radiators on the market, not that you necessarily need them, it's more a cosmetic thing. You wouldn't want to put them in the roof of the case. That is as chunky as you want to go. On the other hand, if you go slimline all-in-one, the case is just going to look absolutely empty. Anyway, the build turned out really nicely, I feel. It certainly looks good. It shows off the features of the case. The untidy backside of it is still fairly tidy. You do get a bunch of cable management grommets in here. There are 6 of the things in 2, 4, 6. The Rampage is an E-ATX motherboard, so it kind of overshadows some of the cable management, but there's still plenty of space to work with, and it works very nicely. Overall, a success. So, if you like this review, thumbs up. If you don't, thumbs down. Leave a comment, have a chat with us. Head over to Kit Guru to see all the photos, and subscribe if you want to see more of our videos. I'm Leo Wardle for Kit Guru. This is Corsair Carbide Air 740.